Welcome all, Raymond for Stream Gamers here. Uh, Today we're going to be talking about setting up a flight in both the Airbus line as well as the Boeing line. I'm going to be utilizing a Boeing 747 and an Airbus A321. A lot of the stuff will be you'll be able to utilize a lot of this information that you're being provided here today with either any of the Boeing lineup or any of the Airbus lineup in general. So I'm going to go over some terminology and some things at the front. So as I discuss these things, I'll maybe explain abbreviations, again as we go through it. But I just want you guys all to have the core knowledge of what these abbreviations stand for. So as we go through them and I refer to them, you at least to go back to the beginning of the video and say, oh yeah, that's what that means. This is not made for those experienced simmers out there that know all this stuff. This is for those simmers that don't know how to do this stuff, don't understand all this stuff. I want to offer up the fact that I am not a pilot. I'm an avid simmer. I enjoy flight simulation and have enjoyed it for a long time to come. And there's a lot of things within the simming community that we long-term people all understand and know, but there's a good group of new people coming into the community that they don't know what these things mean. They don't understand the importance of it. So they end up putting their plane on the runway and push the throttle forward and go. So anyways, let's start with some of these terminologies that I was referring to. We're going to be talking about SID, STAR, Approach, FMS, MCDU. SID, Standard Instrument Departure. Basically, what is the route that you're going to fly when you leave the airport in order to get onto the actual route that you're going to use to get to your destination? STAR, what is after you fly that route, what are the steps you're going to take to get to the approach, which is called the STAR, the Standard Terminal Arrival. Okay? Then approach. Approach is after the STAR, you get into the approach. And then the approach is typically, once you're below 5,000 feet, and you're getting yourself more configured for the landing up until the point you cross the threshold of the runway. That section, that's the approach. Okay? FMS, Flight Management System. The way I understand it, that's the Boeing terminology for their for their flight management computer. Okay? MCDU, Multifunction Control and Display Unit. That is the equivalent for the Airbus side of things. Now, that's not to say that those two MCDUs and FMSs are not used in other aircraft, because I don't know if they are or if they're not. But I'm going to go over Airbus and the Boeing for this demonstration. We will not be flying today. This is more about how do you get the stuff in, and if you want to do it a manual way rather than most of us simming people in the world that have been here for a while, we understand what SimBrief is. We understand Navigraph. We understand these utilities that we use, along with now the newest utility on the block, which is this utility. I intended to have this loaded up, but I forgot to do it. But this is the newest utility for Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024. So what has prompted this video in part is the inability to either import this effectively into the FMS or put this into the FMS in the 747. Now, different Boeing aircraft within 2024 have a utility or a flight bag, not to be confused by the EFB, but an actual flight bag that is over here. And that function allows you to bring in SimBrief into it and then push that out down to the FMS. I'm going to get rid of that, down to the FMS. But the Boeing 747 in 2024 does not have the flight bag. It does have this, and I'm told that you can create your flight plan in here, and then once it's in here, you go down and you pull it into here, and then you can push it through to file a flight plan with ATC and send the route to the avionics. I'm having a lot of mixed success with that, or failure, whichever the case may be. It's not working for me in general, and it's not just me. There's other people that I know that are having a problem with it. So I thought today I would spend some time, and we're going to talk about this system right here and the data that you get from within SimBrief, and how do you get that into the FMS. So there's a few things we want to look at when you're looking at SimBrief. Okay, you have what is the what is the SID, which is the departure. Okay, so if I were to go here and I were to edit this, I'm going to pick a different path, if I can, if there is. That's all group. What's this one here? Let's load that one in. So, for example, this should be your SID, your standard instrument departure. This should be your star. Okay, and this is a transition to get to the star. So we're gonna transition from here into the star and then get to the airport. Okay, and that's the route that we're gonna hypothetically fly, which we're not, but we're gonna get it into the MCDU, and we're gonna go through some of that stuff and show you how I go ahead and do this. Now, again, like I said before, I would not want to profess that I am the foregone thought after guru in all of this, because I'm not. I'm just simply explaining how I do it and then why I do it. I do it this way in the 747 because there is no other consistent way that I can get a flight plan filed within SimBrief and or the planner, the newest utility. I can't seem to get that in. So let's just go up here and we'll just get some power to the aircraft. That's the first thing we want to do. Whoops. That's not what I want to do. Battery, ground power. We'll put that into auto. We'll turn these just so we can get the alignment done, because we'll need that later. Let's put the emergency lights on, and I think that's going to be enough for us to get ourselves started. Okay, so let me pull this down ever. No, I want to be high enough. Well, let me just do this again. Okay. So what I'm up against is this. So for you guys that are working with the FMS and you're trying to hit the clear button, that works well. However, if you happen to just all of a sudden take from your standard view, go down there, and go down there, and want to start tinkering around, you get that hand. You see, you can't click any of these buttons along here because the hitbox on this thing is so big that, you see, I'm not even on it and it's still within the hitbox. So way over here, I can press the N, but I cannot press the O, the T, the Y, or the C. So what I've done is I've created a view that gets that out of the way, and now I can push any of the buttons on here. Not to mention, it's pretty close and hopefully it will be visible for everybody. Okay? So there's that. Now, when you turn this all on, the very first thing you'll see is this ident right here. This is giving you the information of the aircraft and so forth and so on. You click on position. The position is saying, hey, where are you in the world? The last position was here, which is right where we are. I'm not sure that this is necessary, but I'm going to put it in anyways because I know in 2020, Microsoft Flight Sim 2020, we had to do this in order to effectively bring that flight plan in from SimBrief. So whether that's the case here or not, I don't know. But you notice that now the reference airport, which is this airport, says, okay, this is where we are, which is the same as all of these other locations. Route. So the route, typically at this point, there would be a place here where you could import. In 2020, there is a place here where you can import the company route that you've created within SimBrief, and you can just push that button and then load it in and be done with it. But we don't have that utility here. So how do we go about getting the flight plan in this manual thing? Well, we do the same thing. We go CYY. For the demonstration, I'm using Toronto Pearson International and O'Hara, Chicago O'Hara. KORD. Put that in. Now you could put your runway in here and all of that stuff. The runway is 33 right. This stuff isn't, from what I understand, necessary, but you can put it in. All right, a flight plan or flight number, that is, I should say. Okay, we activate this. We execute that. That is where we're coming from. That is where we're going. This is the runway we would be departing on. If we go down here to legs, you will see we're leaving here and it does not have our arrival in yet. Okay? So we can click on depart and arrive, and we know I'll just explain that I'm collecting this data and this information from here. So should you build this flight plan yourself, you would have a similar flight plan in here. Okay, so that's where I'm getting the information, and the other information I'm going to be getting from the other information I'm going to be getting from this area right here. Okay, so we'll pull that aside. So 33 right, that's where we're taking off. Oops, I had that already selected. Let's get down to 33 right. 33 right. And right there is the URSAL4, which was in the flight plan. And the transition is ZOHAN, which is right here. So we'll pull that back over again. So there's our SID, there's our transition. Oops, that's our transition, and that's our SID. Okay, maybe I should make that a little bit bigger for you guys. Make that a little more visible. There. Hopefully that's more visible for you. Do that a little bit more even. Can I go one more click? I can. Okay, so that's our SID, that's our transition. Okay, so we'll pull that aside. We've got that set. What we're going to do is we're going to execute that into the FMS and erase changes to index. So we've got our SID put in. We click back. Now we're going to do what is our star. Okay, so there's the thing that we want for the star. And likewise, runway 27 center, there and there. Okay, so we want this, and we want this as our transition. 27 center is our runway. Okay, so we look for 27 center. ILS 27 center. Okay, the next one was wing something or other. Whoops. Let's back that up. Right there. That is the star that we want to use. 2, yes. And then the transition is weighed. There's no weighed transition. That's interesting. Okay. So one of the deals that we're looking at here is my ARAC cycle is out of date, and that's because I didn't renew my subscription to Navigraph. So your mileage will be maybe a little different here if you have a Navigraph subscription. I suspect as a new flight simmer, you may not have that already, but if you do, yours will be slightly different than mine. Likewise, if you picked a different flight plan, yours will be different than mine, right? Different airport and so forth, so it'll all be different. What we need to do, or what we can do, is we can now make some decisions here what we should or shouldn't be picking in terms of these transitions. What you can do to help with that decision is we can load up a little nav map, and we're going to push this flight plan that I have here into little nav map. Let me go new. No, I don't want to save that. Let me go here, load flight plan. Is this the right one? It is. And put that in. So now I have my flight plan that's coming from Toronto going to, let me get rid of some of these lines, from Toronto going over to Chicago, okay? So what we were up against is our arrival, or our star. We don't have the star that's listed in the flight in the Simbrief flight plan. So if we go into here and we go down to Chicago, right click on Chicago, show arrival procedures, select runway 27 center. There's 27 center. Our star, which was number 2, yes, this is our star right here. So if you look, I'm going to move this in a little bit. This one here. So look at this blue line that's been added when I selected on this. So if I click on that, you see how it's different? Okay, so in a little lab map, you can see what that's going to look like should you decide to go with it. And we did. This is the one we're going with. What we haven't done is our approach. What is going to be our approach? And that's down here in the bottom. It may be hard for you to see, but there's 2 lines in the bottom here that says approach. You could go here and you could say, no, I only want to see approaches, okay? Rather than seeing stars and approaches. But I can see there's only 2 approaches for runway 27 center. It's an ILS approach or a RNAV. We're going to use the ILS, which is that one right there. And you'll notice that our flight plan comes this way, and then the approach is right here. See the approach right there? So that is our approach. So it's kind of a weird thing that it would take us out this way and then circle us back to get over to here. Quite honestly, I see that as a very strange star that we're using. And hopefully I'm doing a reasonable way of explaining this. So we're coming in on our star. We're going to go to this point over here. And then if we decide to use either the RNAV or the ILS approach, we got to fly from here back to here to go into the runway. So to me, the star that we have selected is not appropriate, not by any stretch of the imagination. That star isn't appropriate other than it lines us up properly, right? But let's just breeze through here and see, can we find a star that's maybe a little more appropriate for what we want? If not, we'll stick with the status quo and say that's what we're going to use. No. I mean, that one, no. Where's that one? Same as that. Same as that. I mean, this would be better, at least in the fact that we would come from here, fly down to here, fly this route, pick up the approach and come in. But it's a lot of flying. This one too, not as bad. We would likely go from here out to here, and then, like I say, come in here and go all the way around. I'm not really seeing one that actually stands out. What I'm actually looking for is one that potentially, would say come from here and then come down here and then pick up the approach and bring us in. So I'm going to leave it the way it is. This isn't really picking the most effective star and approaches and stuff like that. So I'll leave it the way it is. If you go into here, it's hard to see maybe, but there is the transitions. These are all of the varying different transitions that we have available to us. If I try to compare those transitions, and I can click on them, right? There's a transition, right? So we could fly out here, come all the way around, and then come back in and have that transition. We could fly that transition, or that transition. Any one of these will work. If we look at this, do we have one of these transitions in there? Is that the top? That's the top, right? Yeah. Okay, FT, no. O, no. UF, no. They don't seem to be. Oh, here's the transition that is in that list. So we're going to pick this one right here. There we go. Okay, so this has been a long exercise of trying to find which transition we should use, but you have to understand that you may be up against that. You may be up against trying to figure out what is the best way for you to come in, and what transition to use. And this is the transition that we're going to, for this demonstration, we are going to use. I would likely, after I got this into the FMC and all that, I would likely come here and probably even get rid of the star altogether. I may not even put the star in altogether, because I would want to come from here straight down to here and go in. But nevertheless, so we've got that in. If we execute, notice it says erase here, and it says erase because we've selected these entities, and it will go away as soon as we execute it. Now we've executed it. That flight plan is in our legs page. So we're going to talk about these things right here: vectors, discontinuities. So let's go back up and talk to vector. Let's talk about vector first of all, I should say. So vector is where you would expect ATC to take you from here and then guide you via, fly heading, blah, 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 climb and maintain speed, blah, 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 and so on, to get yourself to eventually to this waypoint. Once you're here, then you would no longer need to be vectored, and your FMS would just follow that flight plan. So as a real pilot, you would probably leave that in and look at that with that in your mind, expecting ATC to kind of guide you through and how and where you're going to go. As a sim pilot, and I don't use an ATC, I'm going to get rid of that. How do I get rid of that? Well, you can hit the delete key and then select this and remove it. Okay? Now the other option is, I want to get rid of this discontinuity. The other way to do it is click on this, the one below it, and put it on top, and it makes it disappear. You always have to re-execute after you've done that function, okay? So here's another one. There's a discontinuity. If I now click the delete key and hit delete, it goes away. So you have those two options. And again, after you've done that, you'll see up here, this has been highlighted, but once you hit the execute, that disappears, and now that has been actually executed within the FMC. Okay, so you can do it either one of both ways. Click on this, put it over top of that to remove this. You could also, let's say I got this waypoint, this waypoint, this waypoint, and I don't want these two, but I want to keep this one and I want to keep that one. So I could just click this and put it over top of that, and I would remove those other two. Okay? All right. So, in part, our flight plan is configured. It is set up. Oh, we got another vector in there. See the vector right there? So let's delete, get rid of that guy. Let's re-execute. I knew whenever you remove a vector, you're always going to get another discontinuity. So we'll get rid of that discontinuity. We'll re-execute that. It is a good idea to kind of page through and make sure you have none of those. But then it's also equally a good idea. Let me get myself back to the beginning. Then it is also equally a good idea to look at your primary flight display, which is this one right here. I believe that's what it's called. But it's a good idea to take this and turn this out ever so slightly and get yourself a bit of a range, okay? And a range is just that. It's a range of what you're going to see, okay, up to X number of miles out. Then we're going to set this to plan. And you'll see there's our magenta line. This is where we're starting from, and you're going that way. Now that we've done that, it'll be hard for you to see this, but I'll get that out of the way, I guess. Nope. I'm getting it. The new buttons are a little difficult. Okay, so it's hard for you to see, but there's a word here that says step. Once you've selected this to plan, it says step, and it's going to step us through the flight plan, and we're going to be able to see all of the different steps that we're going to take to get to our final destination. So if I click on this button, you see it switches, it switches, it switches. Can I go up a little bit so we can get more view? Yep. And we're going to keep on doing that. Now you can zoom that out further if you want to see a broader view of this, or you can zoom it in closer if you want to see a closer view of it. So that's that. And my guess is this is as we've turned and gone into the airport. And there's the runway. So you can see the flight plan kind of looks okay-ish. Like there is one thing that I find a little bizarre, and that's this. Remember, we came down here, and then we had to turn around and go all the way back, and we thought that was a little weird. So realistically, we could remove any one of these waypoints along the way, and then from, let's say we were to remove these waypoints. Can I zoom that out just a tad more? Yeah. So what we could do is we could remove from here all of these waypoints up to here, and we would remove all of this out, and now it'd go from here to here in. I'm not going to do that, but that is something you could do, and if you did decide to do that, you would, like I showed you before, you would say, okay, listen, I want to keep this one, and I want to keep this one. So I would click this, put it over top of here, and it would get rid of these three waypoints. You would do that same function here. You would find this here, you would find this here, and you'd say, okay, I want to take this and I want to put it over top of the last waypoint along the way here, which would be this one, and that would delete all of them. We're not going to do that, but that's how you could do that function. Can I turn this up brighter? Is it not bright enough? Ah, look at that. Okay, so I'm going to talk just briefly about what we're seeing in here. What does this stuff mean? And that kind of stuff. So we are flying from here to here. It's a total of 3 nautical miles to get to there. At this waypoint, the FMS wants to be at 9,000 or above. That's what the A stands for. At this waypoint, it wants to be 8,000 or above, and you can see the process. Later on, once we get the rest of this put in there, it's going to show us speeds. And it'll say, you know, at this waypoint, we got to be at this speed, and we got to be 9,000 or above. Don't panic if you're not at 9,000, because it says 9,000 or above. But make sure that you're not at 15,000, because Your next one wants to be 8,000 or above, and then 7,000, and 6,000, and 5,000. If you're at 18,000 over there where it says 9, you're going to be chasing. You're going to be chasing yourself all the way down. I have a video that talks about, you know, how do you come in for approach and landing and stuff like that. Look it up in my library. But effectively, it's about energy and how do you disperse the energy, because as you go down, you're building speed, right? But you got to get down at an acceptable height to land. But if you well, let's go over this just quickly. So, for example, if you are 18,000 feet, but the FMS thinks you should be, say, 9,000 or even 10,000 feet, you're 8,000 feet too high. It's going to tell you on the little indicator that you're 9,000 feet too high. And the only way you can get that 9,000 feet down here is by coming down and coming down more aggressive. But as you come down more aggressive, you build speed. So now you're at the right altitude, but the FMC is saying, no, I want you to be at 180 knots and you're at 320. So now you've got to lose the speed, and you can't lose the speed like that. And all of this has to be done within a given amount of miles, right? So you want to make sure that you manage your descent speed or your descent altitude and your speed so that you get to the final altitude and speed. You know, in a 747, summer's around 150 knots, and depending on the airport, but Chicago is summer's around 2,000 feet. That's kind of where you're going to want to be. If you are at 2,000 feet and you're 3 miles to the runway or 5 miles to the runway, but you're going 320 knots, you're going to have a problem. Likewise, if you're going 180 knots, but you're 10,000 feet and you're 3 miles away from the runway, by the time you descend that additional, 10, 12, 15,000 feet, your speed is going to be 320 knots and the runway is going to be right there. And you won't be able to land at 320 knots. It'll be very difficult to land. Even if you do land, you won't get the thing stopped. So anyways, that's for another topic maybe. But here we go. Okay, so let's carry on. Let's turn that back to plan. So the next map, that is. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to finish configuring this system. We have our route, it's in there. We have our legs, they're in there. We have our departure and arrival, they're in there. What we want to do now is we want to go to init reference, and now we want to start talking about the performance. What is our cruise altitude? So if you're flying east, you're going to be flying an odd altitude, okay? And that's anything east. So from 360 degrees to 180 degrees down here, anything within that area, right? So if your flight path is taking you anywhere within that 0 degree to 180 degree-ish, say 5 degree to 175 degree, if you're flying anywhere in that range, your flight altitude needs to be an odd number. If you're likewise flying, let's say at 359 degrees to 181 degrees, and then your flight altitude needs to be even, okay? And it's intended so that when you're flying and you're at 35,000 feet and the oncoming traffic, they'll never be at 35,000 feet. They'll either be, like, you're flying east, 35,000 feet, and the oncoming traffic will only ever be at 36,000 feet or at 34,000 feet. Either way, they will be 1,000 feet of separation. So that's the reasoning behind that. So in this case, we are flying from Toronto to Chicago, which means we're going west, which means we need to be flying at a even number, okay? Now, when you import these things in, let's make this a little bit bigger. 36,000 feet. Now that's the initial altitude, but you can change that altitude as you get to your 36,000 feet. So you may decide to go higher or lower, but that's the altitude that we're going to climb. And you notice how it gave me an even number. Okay, I don't know if that's always consistent like that, but let's presume that it is. So we'll put 36,000. Now 36,000 for the MCDU or FMS is 360, or flight level 360. And there it is. So that's saying that we're going to fly, our cruising altitude is going to be 36,000 feet. Our cost index comes from SimBrief, just the same right there. Okay, that's our cost index, CI, okay, which is 36. I'm going to explain that ever so slightly to the best of my ability, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to do it 100% justice. So cost index, the FMS, along with either flex for Airbus and or thrust for Boeing, I believe is how it works, uses this number to calculate how much thrust or how much throttle to be used to take off. So there's a number of aspects that control why you would do that. One is fuel burn, how much fuel you're going to burn. Obviously, airliners are ever present about the cost of fuel, right? So if you can reduce the amount of thrust, you will reduce the amount of fuel that you burn, therefore reducing the cost. Keep in mind, these things are burning, like the 747 is burning like 17, 18, 19,000 pounds of fuel every hour, right? Some 6 pounds per gallon. So you can do the math. It's a lot, right? And if you've got, thousands of flights a day and you can save $500 on every takeoff, you do the math. It's pretty significant. So that's one aspect for cost index. The other aspect for cost index is noise abatement. So these airports are around cities and centers and so forth where, they're trying to reduce the amount of noise. And so instead of spooling the engines up to, 95%, they'll get them to spool up to 88%, to take a little more longer runway to take off, but it won't be as loud. So noise abatement is a big concern. Okay? Next, let's talk about zero fuel weight, or ZFW, zero fuel weight. It is the weight of the aircraft without fuel. Okay? That's what ZFW right here is, the weight of our aircraft without fuel. 145,000 pounds and 145,081 pounds. Notice that there's decimal here. So it wants us to round to the nearest 1,000 pound. So 145,000 pounds is what we will put into there. Whoops. Will we not put that into there? Maybe it wants me to put a decimal in there as well. No. 145 is our zero fuel weight. Why is that not going in there? That has no reason to not go in there. Huh. That's interesting. 100. Oh, I wonder if I missed a step here. I wonder if we got to go to, so menu. Before, it would give us an option here to put your SimBrief ID in. It doesn't exist anymore. That's what's prompted this whole thing. So let's click on settings. Let's click on weight and balance. Here is where our weight and balance and all of that actually is. So there's our fuel, 178,000 pounds of fuel. But we don't need 178,000 pounds of fuel. What we need, which aircraft am I in? That's the reason why it's caused this problem. I created multiple SimBriefs, and I'm in the wrong one, aren't I? I am. Let's regenerate that. I'll get us to the right one. Let me back this up just a skosh. Okay, so this is the first one. This is the second one. Why am I not? That's weird. Okay, well, we'll quickly do another one. It'll only take a minute. Chicago. 747. I apologize. I probably should at the start of this. You know what? Yeah, let's do that. Let's just get this over here. Let me just show you what I'm doing for those that have never seen this done before. There's no harm in it. So we got new flight. I'm going to go through this quickly. I'm going to pick my airline code, my flight number, my departing airport, my arriving airport. I'm going to go in here. I'm going to scroll down, look for 747. It's coming up. So there's a number of 747s, but I'm going to use the 747-8 freighter. Well, I'm using a freighter. I don't know, but that's what I'm doing. Okay. So you can come in here and you can change this for pounds versus kilograms, depending on what aircraft you fly. If you're flying Airbus, mostly the Airbus configuration is expecting kilograms, whether you like it or not, but that's what it is, because the Airbus is a French-made aircraft. Metric. Boeing, U.S., North America, Canada aircraft, but primarily U.S. standard. Okay? Anyways, so there we go. We'll generate the flight plan, and now we'll have the data necessary here and put all the right data in rather than, the wrong data. Okay. So we're going to change things like cost index, because the cost index that I used is wrong. There's our fuel block. There's our passenger count, but there's our payload. That's the cargo that we're taking right there. Okay. So let me go back in here and we'll first of all, we'll get the fuel and zero fuel weight put in. Okay. Let me scroll down. So fuel, 59,669. 59,669. Oh, I see. That's how you want to be, eh? Get rid of that. Do the scan. 59,669. That wants to go in fuel block. Zero fuel weight is 684,990. 684,990. Right? A cargo, maximum cargo, is 185. I'm going to leave that there, even though the payload says we are supposed to be taking of cargo. We're supposed to be taking 246,000 pounds. But if I change that, that's going to change the rest of this information. So I'm not going to change that. But if you did want to, you could put that in there. Okay? So now we've got that set. Now we're going to go back to index. We're going to go back to index. We're going to go to performance. We're back in the same place where we were before, but our 59,000 pounds, which is right there, our zero fuel weight, you used to be able to do just this, click on this and put that in. That would put our zero fuel weight in. Okay. Our reserve. So reserve is, you could put whatever you want in there. It really doesn't have an impact because we have the total amount of fuel that we need for the flight, which is 59,669 pounds. But our cost index has to be changed. It's 188 now. I thought that was wrong when I put that in. Okay, so our center of gravity is here. Now, it's 11%. If we click on that, it used to be you could put that in 2020, you could just double click on that and it would put the center of gravity in. But it's already calculated our center of gravity as being 11. Center of gravity, let me just briefly talk about that. So center of gravity is, if you were to take that aircraft and put a pin in it somewheres, where would that pin reside where the aircraft would sit level? Where would it be? Would it be on the nose? Well, no, it would just sag right down. Would it be way back here, close to the tail? No, because it would flop forward. Keep in mind, the fuel tanks a lot of the fuel is held in the wings, okay? So it's likely going to be somewhere in that wing areas where that pendulum or pivot point would keep the aircraft level, okay? Level-ish. I think it's intended to have a small nose-up attitude ever so slightly in order to fly because it wants to. Anyways, that's another conversation for flight dynamics, which we're not going to talk about. Okay. So fuel temperature is that. So we've put all of this information in, and now our next step is we're going to look at thrust. Okay, so if we look at I did that wrong. Let me regenerate that. I want to briefly talk about thrust. Now, I understand this probably the least amount about all of the stuff we're going to be talking about is thrust limit, okay? But I know that thrust is an FMC controlled function based on cost index and this setting, so it determines how much thrust we should be using to take off with, okay? When you're in SimBrief, you are at this screen. If you click on View, this now gives you a bit of a breakdown of all of the aspect of the flight. So it tells you, for example, the flight number is ACA 1996. We're taking off from Toronto, we're going to Chicago, our cost index, our distance, our air distance, and there's a whole host of information in here, along with our fuel. If you look at here, the trip fuel is 28,000 pounds. We're going to fly for an hour and 15 minutes. I believe that's 115 minutes, so that's almost 2 hours. I take that back. With 15 minutes of contingency fuel, it says we're going to have another 5,600 pounds, which doesn't make any sense that 15 minutes would burn 5,600 pounds, but actually, maybe it does make sense. Alternate fuel, final reserve fuel, right? So all of these numbers gets us to this final fuel, okay? So the long and the short of it is, in this area here, somewhere in here, I found it a while ago, and it talked about if you say, for example, to select this, okay, that's going to be what we're going to use. Now there's a temperature function that we need to put into there. And I did find it in here. I won't spend any more time talking about this, but somewhere's in that briefing gives you a temperature in which you use for all of this. The next thing is our takeoff. So our takeoff says, okay, V1, VR, and V2 speeds, those are the speeds in which we plan to make decisions about, okay, we're not going to stop. We've reached our V1 speed. We're not stopping. We're taking off regardless. VR is our rotate, and V2, I'm not 100% sure why V2 is there, but it's where you're going to actually rotate the aircraft and take off, okay? And I typically, when it calls out rotate, I typically wait another 5 miles, 10 miles an hour more, and then I rotate. Flaps are just that. Flaps typically in the 747 are going to use flaps 20. And so flaps are over here, and it's how much flap is necessary to take the aircraft off, right? So because of aerodynamics is a thing, you have to make a decision how much flaps you're going to take off. Just know that a Boeing 747 10 to 20 degree flap is fine. Center of gravity, it should now pick up the center of gravity for us, and it does not go in there. I was struggling with this a while ago, and I come to realize that if I put that 11 in where we saw at the previous screen, that's the right center of gravity, right? So the performance screen, which is here, that's the center of gravity. However, for whatever reason, now let me get back to where I was. Thrust, no, I was in takeoff. That's where it was. For whatever reason, when you click on this, it puts 9 down here, or some erroneous number. Just remember to take that information, put that in. Trim is 6.5, so trim is 6.5. This number needs to be at 6.5. So if we look at the trim wheel, let me get into a different configuration. Just going to enable my. I have a. For most of you guys know that I have these switch panels, autopilot, radio stack, and trim wheel, and all that fancy doodabber stuff. So trim, you see that number is changing now. We want 6.5, which is right there. So that's what it's telling us here. We want 6.5, and you adjust your trim by doing just that. Now, where is the trim? I guess it's this right here. I never use it, so I don't really know. But for those that use trim, you guys know where it is. Move that trim until you get this set to whatever it says right there. Okay. Now notice that once we did the flaps and the center of gravity and the trim and all that, now you have reference speeds. So we click on them, and it actually transfers them over into bigger, more bolder numbers. Those are our V1, VR, and V2 speeds. Okay. Remember V2 at 154. We're going to talk about that in a moment here. Okay. Toga, which is our takeoff weight. How much weight do we have in an aircraft at the time of takeoff? If we click on this, it does not give this. In 2020, when we click on this, it will give us an entry. However, if we look in here, we have our takeoff right here. Estimated takeoff weight, 742,659 pounds. Notice it's decimal, so it wants to the nearest 1,000 and the first decimal. And that was 742.6. 742.6. Huzzah. It takeoff, speed deleted. We redo that, clear the warning message, we are done. Moving into the performance, that's all set. That is all set. Now, I said to you, keep this 160 now turned into 160 because of the takeoff weight. We keep that in mind because up here, we're going to talk about this. Now, I realize this is FMS and MCDU, but we're going to finish off with this. Remember, we are taking off and we are climbing to 36,000 feet. Oops. There, 36,000 feet. We are also departing on runway 23. So if we go here, and I'm still utilizing this for a couple of functions, and that's to gain some, get some information from. So I'm going to put Toronto. I'm going to put Toronto's ICO code in correctly. There's their ICO code. And so if I click on that little ditty dotty there, there's the runways. If I scroll down here and look for, my memory is just, by the way, I have the world's best memory. It's just very short. Don't last long. Anyways, runway 23, that's the runway we're taking off on. So here, our runway heading is 226. We always want to set our runway heading here. I could have done this faster if I'd have gone the other way. But anyways, we're there. We're in the weeds now as it is. So we'll get to 226 eventually. Okay, 226. So always want to have that. And also remember, it said our speed was 160. I want to be 10 knots above 160. That means this has now been configured. I'm going to fly LNAV and VNAV once we turn on the flight directors. So we're gonna depart on LNAV, VNAV. So this panel is set up. We take off. The only thing we need to do after we take off and get stable flight is turn on the autopilot. And this flight should fly from Toronto all the way to Chicago, get down on the ground, and away you go. Now you'll have to manage speed and flaps and all that kind of stuff, but that's not what this is for. So that is a Boeing-ish setup in 2024, Microsoft Flight Sim 2024, it is all set up. Now, flight plan is in there, our flight directors are on. The IRS, the initial reference system has been aligned. The satellites know where we are in the airport, and we are ready to go. There's a number of other things that you have to do in order to get yourself started and get yourself pushed back and all that. But this is for primarily, how do you set this up should you make a decision that you want to do it manually and you don't have the option to import. Okay, so the very next one we do, we'll be talking about the Airbus flavor, and I realize this is going to be a bit of a longer video, but I want to group the two of them together so that you have material to look both sides of it. Okay, so we're going to through video editing, we're going to click off of this and we're going to click over to an Airbus, be on ground in a similar configuration, and we will be back shortly. All right, here we are. Switched over to the Airbus A320. Now the A320 does have a flight bag. It does have the ability to import this in here by SimBrief. But I'm going to go over this one the same as I did the Boeing, as if we can't bring this stuff in. I will utilize the flight bag to give me some information, but I will not import that into the FMC. Okay, so MCDU. Now let's talk about MCDU, because in the Airbus, that's what this system is called, is the MCDU. I will hopefully not get them mixed up, but there's a chance that I'm going to. All right, let's go to the overhead. Let's go over to the overhead first of all, and let's get some power on this thing and do some general stuff. So batteries are on. We'll put the ground power on. We'll put the APU fuel pump on. We'll turn the initial reference IRS alignments to on. Do we need anything else? I don't think we do for what we're doing. I just do those two buttons because I just typically do those two buttons in this function. Anyways, down to here. Now, We're going to get this alignment window, warning window. We're going to get rid of that for now. We'll go through a few of these things, and I hope this will be a little quicker because we've gone through some of the nuts and bolts of doing it. And although the menus look different, the functions generally are the same. Okay? So we're going to go into the FMGC. What that stands for, I don't know, but that's what it is. We've got to wait for a response. There's our response. So this is just giving us the same kind of detailed information about the aircraft, the database, and you know, is it up to date, and so forth and so on. We click on INIT, init. Here is where we would click on to import this flight plan in if we were doing a SimBrief import. We're not, but that's where we would do it. So we have our route, we have our flight, flight number, and we have our from and our to. In Airbus, it's slightly different. We type in CYYZ/. So every time you see a slash, that means you need to do something / something, okay? And we're going to, I'll get it, KORD. And we're going to put that in there. And our flight number, we're going to just, again, you don't have to do this, but I've just gotten into such a habit that I do just this. Now, our cost index, our cruise heading and temperature, we are going to get, let me finish setting this up if I am. We're going to get from SimBrief, we click on View PDF, it provides us this, and in here, if we look, there's our wind and our temperature right there. So 323 at 34 degrees. Wait a minute. I may have to go back down here. We may have to go here. We may have to change this to metric. Because again, remember I said earlier on, Airbus typically is all metric, so we'll do that. We'll get rid of that window. After it regenerates itself, ta-da, then we'll hit the view. Now our temperature is still showing the same unit. That's weird. Anyways, I'm going to put that one in. I don't think it's right, but I'm going to put it in anyways. Because I cannot see at whatever our altitude, cruising altitude is going to be, that it's 34 degrees, but we're going to put it in. Flight level and temperature. Flight. Oh, no. I take this back. Yeah. I'm looking at that wrong. CYYZ. We're gonna look at another website. It's called metar-taft.com. We're gonna punch in Toronto in there, and we're gonna get this. So what it's looking for here is what is our flight level, our expected flight level. Okay, so our expected flight level is 36,000 feet. So 360 / and our current airport weather temperature is -8, right there. So I'll find it. It's here. I won't find it. Yeah, it is. There it is. -8. So we're going to fly to 36,000 feet, and the ground field temperature right now is -8 degrees Celsius. Okay? So that's it for init. We're as far as we need to go there. Now we want to go look at our flight plan. There is our departing airport. There is our arriving airport. Okay? So if we click on this and we click on departure, we are departing runway 33 right, right there, 33 right. And we are using the Ursula. My pronunciation of these SIDS and stars are not great, so to me Ursula makes sense, but it may not actually be that. And Zoan is the transition as we talked about before. We will insert that. This is the effect of Boeing's execute. Okay. Now we are going to get some of these manual and discontinuities. We'll go over that and show you how to remove that just the same. But we're going to put in our arrival, which is our star, and runway 27 center. So we're looking for 27 center here. 27 center, ILS 27 center. We're looking for, wait, wait 2. Let's see if this one has the which one is it that we wanted? Wade 2, Wade as well. So that doesn't exist in here. And you notice on the Boeing we actually had a transition that we could pick here. I don't have that here at all. But we did pick a transition here, did we not? What did we pick? I don't remember. Again, you could utilize little nav map in this function to find which is the most appropriate one that you think we should be using, and so forth and so on. I'm just going to pick this one because I'm going to pick that one because, you know, there it is. Okay, so we now have this. Now, the one thing I didn't do in the Boeing, which I wish I would have, is kind of talked about some of the intermediate waypoints / airways, should there be some. And I didn't go over that. I wish I had, but I'll do that in here. If you have questions about how to do it in the Boeing FMS, please send me a message, give me a comment, and I'll walk through that for you guys. So unlike the Boeing, where you can click on here and put it over top of and get rid of it, in the Airbus you cannot do that. You use the clear function. You cannot get rid of a discontinuity unless if there's a manual in there. You have to remove the manual first, then clear, and then remove the discontinuity. But note, there is no re-execution of this. This is all live. As you're changing it is live. It happens. You don't have to re-execute just like you do in the Boeing. So each of the Boeing and Airbus have their ups and downs, their ease of function, but mostly I think it's about what you're used to flying. Now, I will say this, I fly Airbus probably more than Boeing, but I'm not immune to flying Boeing either. I like the 737, the PMDG 737, the 737 MAX that's now in 2024. I like the Airbus A320, 321, 319, A310. I love flying the A310. I like the Dreamliner for Boeing, so I fly them a lot, all of them really, but my primary is probably Airbus. Anyways, enough of that rambling. Now, in our flight plan, we had our SID, our transition, we have our star and our transition, but notice that there is this one other waypoint in there. Now, sometimes that waypoint might be an airway to a waypoint, or a waypoint to an airway to another waypoint. An airway is a group of points along the way, which constitutes the entirety of the airway. You cannot join an airway unless you join it from, like, say for example, this. If I were to try to join an airway, just in some area, let's say right here, let's say there's an airway here. I wonder if I wouldn't do justice of this explanation if I brought up and showed the airways. airspace, airways. All. Thought I just showed them all. Oh no, sorry, I was clicking on the wrong things. Okay, so little nav map, airways. These are the high altitude airways. These are the low altitude airways. So we're just going to zoom in here and just we'll get a bit of a picture. Let's do that over here without all of the airports around. So you can see these lines are airways. Okay, I cannot get onto this airway unless I go to the, say, this waypoint, which then gets me onto that airway. Okay, so if I'm flying around and I want to get on this airway so I can go here, I have to, let's say if I take off from here, I have to get to that waypoint, then I can specify this airway. The airway is J114. Now, let's say I'm traveling this airway and I want to get onto this airway. Well, that's okay because they join. So I can go from this airway to this airway via this VOR, right? So I would, in this example, I would go to this waypoint here, get onto this airway. My next waypoint in the flight plan would be that VOR that was right there. That circle is a VOR. So my next waypoint would be the VOR, and then from the VOR, I would go onto this airway, which is J148. Now I can fly this airway until I want to get off this airway. So for example, I want to get off the airway because I want to go, let's say I want to go over here. So I can get off the airway on this waypoint. So I have this airway listed, and then I get off the airway onto this waypoint, and then that leads me to wherever it is that I want to go. I hope I've done a reasonable explanation of that. Again, if I haven't, comment in the comment section. I will, if it's required, I will do a more in-depth discussion about airways and waypoints and VORs and transitions and all that kind of stuff. If you want me to, I'll go over that. Again, keep in mind, all this data I give is what I've learned. I'm not saying it's necessarily 100% accurate. It just works for me. As I said, I'm not a pilot. I wish I was, but I'm not. And those aspirations have come and gone. I'm a little longer in the tooth than I should be to start those. But anyways, what started this rabbit trail was we were talking about this waypoint. So we have all the other waypoints in here, but we didn't put that one in. And we're going to put that one in. So in the Airbus, we look for the waypoint previous to that, which is Zoan. I'll find it in here. It's right there. So there's the previous. Let's take care of this so that my OCD doesn't have to interfere with the rest of the world. Anyways, so Zoan. I want to go from Zoan to OBSTR. How do I do it? I can click on this, and here it says next waypoint. So if I were to type in STR, I believe. Yes. So I put that in. I punch that into there. Here you have to insert this now newly added waypoint. And there it is. Very often you're going to get another one of these discontinuities. Not to worry. Hit clear. Hit OK. And you're done. So now we have imported that waypoint between our SID and transition to our star and transition. Okay, so that's how you do it, and you do the same. And let's say we were taking from here and we were going to go to an airway. You would type your airway in there, and you'd put that in. That airway often results in a multitude of waypoints. It isn't like what we just did here, where we saw only one waypoint being added in. But if we were getting onto a specific airway, all of the waypoints that were a part of that airway, it would list it. So I wanna draw your attention to see all of these things that say Ursula 4. Well, that is the SID, and a part of the SID are all of these waypoints that are described here. If they say that underneath their waypoint, that waypoint is a part of the SID. There is nothing a part of the transition because it's onto itself. There's nothing a part of this newly added waypoint that we put in because it's onto itself. However, this is our star, and you will see that underneath a few of these things as we come in. Okay, so that's how this works in the Boeing world. If I wanted to add, oops, I've gone the wrong way. In the Boeing world, if I wanted to add this one in here like I did, what I would do is I would type it out into the scratch pad. It would be down here, and I would click this waypoint right here, and it would put that above here. So where you want to put it, click it, and it'll go above, right? So anything that you click, wherever you put it, when you click here, it's going to go above the item in which you click. That's effectively how to do that in the Boeing. But again, if that's not clear enough and you guys want a little more detailed information about that, by all means, put a note in the comment section. If there's enough interest in that, I will recreate another video and I'll delve more into that directly. Okay, so we've got our flight plan in. What do we need to do next? We need to do our performance. Yes, we need to do our performance. So this is where our performance is. Now we're going to get these V speeds provided to us by going over here to the flight bag, and we're going to put some information in here to do just that. Okay. So even though I didn't hit SimBrief, it knows this is what we're doing because that's what's in the FMS. It knows the payload. Now I can do this and bring the payload in from SimBrief, and I might do that to help. No, I won't. No. So let's just look at this. It says we got 151 passengers. If I double click on this and go 151, there it goes. The cargo says we are. This is in pounds. So let's change this over to metric because our flight plan in SimBrief is listed in metric as well. So our cargo is 3,633. Come on, clicky. 3,633 kilograms. Our fuel is 5,318 kilograms, 5,318, and we apply. And we'll do an instant. You can do it slowly if you want. Notice you heard a beep. That's the fuel and passengers and cargo being loaded on the aircraft. And we're getting a notification of that. And there'll be a warning window here somewhere telling us these wonderful things. Anyways, let's not get distracted. Come on down, come on down, come on down, come on down. Okay, so there's our center of gravity right there, right? Our live gross weight, dry, and all of the information that we require is in here, okay? Our next thing that we'll need to know is we will need to know things about our V speeds and all that. How do we gain that information? Well, we go in here and we know we're taking off 33 right, so we pick 33 right. There's left. No, that's the wrong one. I'll get it. It's here hiding on me. There it is. Our heading was, what was our heading? I thought I had figured that out. Did I not get that information at one point? I'm collecting this information from Little Nav Map. But, oh, that's what we did. We used this up here. We can do that again. So let's get our information. There's our runway. Runway heading is 22. No. We're taking off on 3-3, right? Yeah, we're taking off on 3-3. I may have put that wrong. You guys might be screaming at me saying, "Why are you putting in 2-6?" I'm in Toronto. One moment now. Let me just find out where I'm in this world. 3-3 is our takeoff. 3-3 right. Okay. So let's go find 3-3 in here. Here's 3-3 right there. 317. So our heading right here is 317. Now it's got 3166.6. That's probably pretty accurate. I'm going to leave that alone. I wonder what happens if I sync that. It does. It pulls all of the data in. So our takeoff runway length, which is 33367, is meters. Heading, surface is dry. Winds are 320 at 13. If we look at our METAR report, 13 at 320. 320 at 13. Temperature is -8 degrees Celsius. So it's pulling all of that information in appropriately. So our weight, this is our takeoff weight. Just like we did on the Boeing, we need to know what our actual takeoff weight is. And so our estimated, that's ET, takeoff weight. So and this is MTOW, don't use this one. This is what our maximum could be, but this is what it actually is. Okay, so 70,886. 70,886. Okay. If we're using air conditioning on, the anti-ice is off, and we're using forced toga, which will be off because we're going to use flex. If our flaps are in configuration 1, which they will be, when we calculate, we should get all of the relevant information that we now need later on. So our flex temperature, 150 or 53, our V1, 153, 157, 159, respectively. Okay, and our center of gravity is 30.4. Now let's go down to the FMC that we have that information. We'll revert back there a couple of times, but let's go down here. And we're going to go back there because I can't remember. You know, I got a bad case of CRS. 153, 157, 159. 153. 157. So flaps is typically flaps 1. Now again, you might utilize a different flap configuration if, when you go here, you decide to use a different configuration. But we are using flaps 1 as our primary configuration. So you go flaps 1. Likewise, our flex temperature, right there, flex 53, we will put that in. Now, varying different Airbus aircraft have flex. They may have it in a different location. For example, A310, it's up here in the dash. It's more, this one isn't as much digital, it's up over in this location. But right now, we put in 53. And so like the Boeing, it utilizes this information to make decisions on how much thrust will be used in the Boeing where you hit toga, or when you in the Airbus when you hit flex or toga. So that brings us to the throttle quadrant a little bit in here. We'll just briefly talk about this. So we have toga, takeoff, right? Full thrust. We have flex. We have climb. We have regular auto throttle. We have zero. Okay. So in the Airbus, typically you will use flex to make your decision rather than toga. If you had a short if you had a short runway, really heavy, blah blah blah, adverse winds, you might utilize toga. But in general, you're going to use flex, which is the temperature that we put in there, to make decisions on how much thrust it should go. Even though the throttles will stay here, but depending on what you set for cost index versus for the cruise and the whole thing, as well as the flex temp that you're using, it may use 88% thrust, it may use 95% thrust, it may use 100% thrust. All of that is within the calculation, and when you set flex, the aircraft will make those decisions for you. So you will push the throttle up to flex, you'll take off, you'll rotate, you'll climb, you'll get to stable flight, gear will come up, you'll get to some stable flight. It will then tell you in your panel up here, it'll be flashing CL mode, CL mode, CL mode. It then wants you to put yourself into climb mode. Keep in mind, if you stay in flex, you're going to struggle in the climb. You're just not going to have the amount of thrust necessary to get yourself climbing. So be mindful of that little flashing window when it says switch it to climb. Also be mindful that you don't accidentally push that lever because it's very sensitive. Now there is a click. It's hard to hear it, but there is a click when it's in these modes. Okay, so just be mindful that if you are in CL mode and you're flying along and the aircraft is looking ridiculous or is doing something silly, look up here and make sure that you're in there, or look down here and make sure that you are actually in the actual climb mode that you should be in. Okay, little rant about that. So we've got that set. We'll go to our next phase. I'm going to breeze through this and kind of go through this ever so slightly. I won't spend a lot of time here, but suffices to say, in manage mode, it will manage your climb rate speed for you, but you can override that. You can say, no, I want to climb at this speed. That's the speed I want to climb in. Put that in there, and it will attempt to climb at that speed if it can, and as long as it follows the rules and laws that it's supposed to follow. You're not supposed to be climbing. You're not supposed to be going any faster than 250 knots below 10,000 feet, and yada yada. There's a bunch of rules. Also, there's a bunch of rules as you fly. It'll say, hey, you should be at this speed. So if you try to put a faster speed in there than what the FMS-MCDU says in the legs page, it won't do it. Okay. Next phase is your cruise. So this is you're at the top there, you're ready to go, and you're just cruising along. Again, you can override that by changing this in here, okay? The same thing will go for your descent speed, your approach and all that. I won't spend a lot of time in here, but there's a lot of information in SimBrief that allows you to fill all of this in. Your QNH is your barometric pressure. What is it on your arrival? What is the temperature? What is the wind speed and which direction it's blowing out of? Your transition speed. So you're going to transition from 18,000 here in North America. In most of Europe, I think it's 6,000. Your barometric pressure, your radios, all of that. You can go in here and you can fill this out if you choose to. I almost never do. I probably should start doing it because it's a more accurate way of doing it. Okay, so that leads us to, let's go back into the performance area because I want to talk about, again, 159. Okay, so let's keep that in mind. So we want our speed 10 knots above that. So 150, 169 is kind of the speed. 170 is good. Our departure heading, it was 318, whatever it is. I think it was 318 or 316, 317, something in that area. We're going to climb out to 36,000 feet. 36,000 feet. I always like to have this set for a reasonable time climb rate should the managed mode not function the way it's supposed to. Now, it will function 99.99% of the time if you, I want to say do it right. But before we can do that, we have to set the QNH. Now, there are utilities that allow us to get this into inches of mercury. Inches of mercury. QNH versus HPA, Hector kilopascals, I think is what it's called. Anyways, this is kind of a North American-ish thing, whereas most of the rest of the world uses Hector kilopascals. I think that's what it's called. You can calculate that, but in the Airbus, you can switch this little doodadby thing here from Hector kilopascals into inches of mercury, and then we now know that here it says it's 30.13. This is, yes, 30.13. So we'll just change this doodabber for 30.13. Now, while you're doing this, if you get a notification or a buzzer, don't be alarmed. It's just telling you that this does not match this, and it's out by a certain amount, okay? So if you get there, I don't know if you heard that bing, but that bing is telling us that this to here is so far apart, it's not right, and it's just warning us that that's wrong, that's not coinciding with one another. So don't worry about it. You'll get it over here. You'll flip this over. You'll turn this to 30, 1-3. Oops, 1-3. Okay, so you got that set now. The next step is we're going to put on the flight directors. So unlike 2020 and a lot of the aircrafts, when you turn on one flight director, the other one is automatically turned on. It does not do that here. You need to turn both of them on. Okay, so now that you got both of your flight directors on, you've got your flight plan in there. You've got your speed 10 knots above V2. You've got your heading turned on, and you notice that the globe came on here. So it is now set for what is called managed mode. So it's going to fly the heading. The minute you turn on the autopilot and the auto throttle, it's going to fly the heading based on the FMC or MCDU. It's going to fly this green line, which most people lovingly refer to as the magenta line. But in Airbus, it's green. Because why? Well, French. And that's not a shot to the French, by the way. It's just different than what we're used to here in North America. And I get that the world is different everywhere. So anyways, so please don't take that as if I've given some kind of shot at some nationality, because I haven't. Maybe fun with it a little bit. But anyways, so that is us set up. We have our MCDU set up. One final thing is that we would need to change our flaps for flaps 1. Okay. We need to go back over here. We need to look at our payload, and you'll notice that right here it says 0.02 up. That's referring to our trim. Okay. So, I'm trying to remember the button that I used to get trim set. So 0.02. 0.02 is that, or 0.2? It gets complicated when I'm doing this. No, I always got to go here, and then I can go here. What did I say? 0.2. Okay. So let's go back down here. 0.2. So there's 0, there's 1. So 0.2 is kind of like a fifth of that, right? So I could roll that over and get it to there. I got to put more power on the aircraft because this is not working. I guess I got to wait until I get, engine start and all that stuff to be able to do that. But you would roll this so that this indicator was, pointing somewhere around here, and that would be the correct trim. Okay, don't get distracted by flaps 10, because flaps 10, that gauge that we're using here is kind of a standard gauge, and I think it's more driven to Boeing than it is to the Airbus world, but nevertheless. Okay, I think I've gone over everything that I wanted to go over. If you guys all found, any of you guys found this helpful, I appreciate a like, comment, subscription. Would be fantastic for me. I did have a goal. We didn't quite achieve it, but I'm continuing to try to get 500 subscribers. That's my goal. That's where I want to be, and we're climbing. We're going to keep on climbing. So like, comment, subscription, notification bell. I don't use that one very often, but notification bell will tell you when the next video comes out. I'm trying to release a video once a week-ish. Sometimes I'll do a multiple videos a week. Sometimes I might be a little longer in the week, but I'm trying to get one out every week. This one has been a long one, and I apologize for the length of it, but there's a lot of information packed into here. So you new budding pilots, simmers, and so forth, and maybe even some of you simmers that have been simming for a while that just haven't delved into the weeds like this, and to get into this intricate way of how to set the MCDU, and you've always relied on third-party utilities to bring the stuff in. You can see You don't need that stuff. You can actually just put all this stuff in yourself. Generate the flight plan, see it there. Okay, that's where I'm going to go. I'm going to go from here to here. And the other thing is, and quickly on a side note, you don't need any of those flight plan generators. You need to use SimBrief. You don't need to use the newest flight plan generator. You can use simply little nav map. Hey, I'm flying from here to here. What are the SIDs? Okay. What are the stars? Okay. What are the approaches? Okay. I want to get onto this airway. So in order for me to get on that airway, I got to go to that waypoint, and then that gets me on the airway, fly the airway, blah, blah, blah. Bang, now you got a flight plan that's now generated in here. You take that information and you put that into the FMC and or FMS and or MCDU, and you're done. So we rely on these other utilities, but the reality is little nav map will do all of that for you just the same. It'll give you your runway lengths, it'll give you your headings, your frequencies, and all those things that you need to set up. So you don't really need SimBrief, although it's a very nice utility. Don't get me wrong, I love it, I use it all the time, but you don't need to use it. So like, comment, subscribe. Raymond for Stream Gamers. I appreciate your patience and your time in watching all of this. I hope it's been helpful. You know, I do this because I like to do this. I find it interesting, and I gain knowledge in the simming world by people that do this kind of stuff. So give us comments if you have points and tips that I haven't gone over that you find important to add in there. Put the comments in the comment section. As always, don't sweat the little things. The little things will look after themselves. The big things, do the things you can take care of. Don't worry about the other ones. If you can't do anything about them, you can't do anything about them. Don't worry about them. They'll have to go by the wayside. And at very, very most important, be kind. Wave at your neighbor. Say hello to somebody. Give somebody a smile. It brightens up everybody's day, and they'll do it back to you, and life will be grand. Thank you for watching. Raymond, Stream Gamers. Bye-bye now.